If I told you that two supplements sitting side by side on the same shelf could look identical, cost the same, and promise the same results, yet one is backed by clinical trials and the other barely holds up under scientific scrutiny, you'd probably want to know which is which. Most people don't realize this, but the supplement industry doesn't separate tradition from evidence. Plants with real, measurable effects on brain chemistry are sold right next to ones that have never been properly tested in humans. Not folklore, not guesswork. Real mechanisms mapped through randomized controlled trials, multi-omics research, and modern pharmacology. Today, we're breaking down 10 of the most talked about plants for mood and depression and looking at what actually holds up when you put them under scientific scrutiny. Stick around, because number 4 has clinical results that rival prescription antidepressants. And number 9 doesn't just affect your mood. It can completely change how your body processes other medications. If you're interested in understanding what's actually happening behind the label, make sure to subscribe. We break down complex plant science into something you can actually use. So let's get into it. These are 10 plants that could help support your mood and what the research actually says about how they work. Number 1, St. John's wort. For centuries, St. John's wort was just a folk remedy, brewed by monks for melancholy and packed into wound dressings by soldiers. That's all it was, tradition. Then it went through proper randomized controlled trials for depression, and it held up, especially for mild to moderate cases. It doesn't work through one simple magic ingredient. Instead, compounds like hyperforin, hypericin, and a group of flavonoids work together. They help keep key mood chemicals, serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine, active in the brain for longer. Over time, that can lift mood, improve interest in daily activities, and support emotional balance across several weeks. Meta-analyses comparing it to SSRI antidepressants in mild to moderate depression show similar effectiveness, sometimes with fewer side effects like weight gain or sexual dysfunction. But there's a serious catch. St. John's wort also speeds up liver enzymes, specifically CYP450, and a transporter called P-glycoprotein. That can lower blood levels of many medications, including hormonal contraceptives, blood thinners, some antidepressants, and even HIV or heart medications, sometimes to the point where they stop working properly. The old lore said this plant heals sadness. Modern data says it really can help mood, but it also reshapes how your body processes other drugs. Both of those things are true, and you need to understand both to use it safely. Ideally, with a clinician who can check for interactions. Number 2, ashwagandha. Ashwagandha has been used for centuries as a stress support plant, but when scientists study it today, they're not really looking at depression directly. They're looking at stress. What the data consistently shows is that it helps regulate your body's main stress system, known as the HPA axis. Think of it like turning down a stress response that's been stuck in the on position for too long. In clinical studies, ashwagandha has been shown to lower cortisol levels, the primary stress hormone. And for people who feel constantly overwhelmed, tired, and mentally drained, that matters. Because when chronic stress starts to come down, mood often improves with it. Some of its active compounds, called withanolides, also interact with the brain's calming pathways, similar to how GABA works, and may support brain resilience under stress. There's also early evidence suggesting effects on things like sleep quality and fatigue. But here's where it gets important. Ashwagandha isn't a direct antidepressant. The strongest evidence is in people whose low mood is driven by chronic stress, not in major depressive disorder on its own. And not all products are equal. Standardized root extracts, where the withanolide content is measured, behave very differently from generic powders, which often don't tell you what you're actually getting. So while it's not a cure for depression, ashwagandha can be a useful tool, especially when stress is the root of the problem. Just make sure it's used thoughtfully, and ideally with guidance if other medications or conditions are involved. Number 3, lavender. For most of its history, lavender was something you put in linen drawers and bath salts, not something anyone thought to test like a drug. That changed when a German company developed a standardized oral lavender oil called Selexin and actually put it through proper clinical trials. In studies on people with generalized anxiety disorder, this lavender preparation performed about as well as the anti-anxiety drug lorazepam on symptom scores, but without common side effects like heavy sedation, dependence, or mental fog. The main compounds, linalool and linaloyl acetate, act on the brain's GABA system, your built-in calming pathway. but they bind at different sites than benzodiazepines, which likely explains why they don't carry the same risk of dependence. For depression, the strongest evidence shows up in people dealing with both anxiety and low mood at the same time, where stress, poor sleep, and constant worry are driving the symptoms. In these cases, standardized oral lavender oil has been shown to reduce anxiety, improve sleep, and over time, gently lift mood. But here's where people get it wrong. Not all lavender works the same way. The clinical results come from a specific standardized oral extract, not from teas, candles, or aromatherapy. Those may feel relaxing, but they don't deliver the same dose or consistency used in studies. Lavender is generally well tolerated, but it can still interact with other sedatives. So like everything on this list, it works best when used deliberately and with awareness of what you're actually taking. Number 4, saffron. Crocus sativus, the plant that gives us saffron, spent most of history as a luxury spice reserved for royalty, largely because of how difficult it is to produce. It takes around 150 flowers just to yield a single gram of dried threads. Today, it's something else entirely. Saffron has become one of the best studied plants for mood, and the results are hard to ignore. Clinical trials and meta-analyses in people with mild to moderate depression show that standardized saffron extracts can reduce symptoms about as much as some conventional antidepressants used in those studies, often with a relatively gentle side effect profile. And this is where it gets interesting. Saffron doesn't act on just one pathway. Its main compounds, crocin, crocetan, and saffronol, work across several systems at once. They help maintain serotonin levels, influence dopamine, support the brain's calming GABA system, and provide antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects. Newer research also suggests saffron may increase BDNF, a key factor involved in brain repair and adaptation, through the mTOR pathway, which is also targeted by some modern antidepressants. In real-world terms, that can translate into gradually improved mood, better motivation, and a noticeable reduction in that heavy, low-energy feeling over several weeks. But quality matters more here than most people realize. The doses used in clinical studies are specific, and many low-cost saffron supplements are either underdosed or adulterated. Standardized extracts from reputable sources make a real difference. And there's one important safety note. Higher doses of saffron have been linked to uterine contractions, so it should be avoided during pregnancy. And as always, if you're taking other medications, it's worth checking with a clinician first. Saffron may look like a simple spice, but in terms of clinical evidence, it's one of the few plants on this list that genuinely competes with pharmaceutical options. Number 5, Rhodiola rosea. Rhodiola rosea is a hardy plant that grows in cold, rocky environments where very little else survives. And that resilience is exactly what drew the attention of Soviet researchers, studying how to keep soldiers and cosmonauts alert under extreme stress. Today, it's often described as a stimulating adaptogen, meaning it tends to increase energy and help the body handle stress more efficiently. Its main compounds, rosavins and saladroside, have been shown in lab and animal studies to influence serotonin and dopamine, and to lightly inhibit monoamine oxidase, or MAO, which is a target of some older antidepressant drugs. That helps explain why, in small human trials, rhodiola has been shown to reduce symptoms of mild to moderate depression and fatigue, often improving energy, focus, and stress resilience within a few weeks. But there's a trade-off. The human data is still limited. Smaller studies, shorter durations, and mixed quality. So it doesn't have the same level of evidence as something like St. John's wort or saffron. And because it's stimulating, it doesn't work the same way for everyone. In practice, rhodiola tends to work best for people whose low mood comes with exhaustion, burnout, or brain fog. But for those with anxiety-driven depression, it can sometimes feel a bit too activating, especially at the start. That's why dose and timing matter. Starting low and taking it earlier in the day can make a big difference. There's also early research suggesting rhodiola may influence the gut microbiome in ways that affect mood, but that's still emerging and not yet fully understood. And like many plants on this list, quality matters. Look for extracts standardized for rosavins and saladroside, since generic powders can vary widely. Rhodiola can be a powerful tool, but it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. How it feels often depends on whether your system needs more energy or less stimulation. Number 6, holy basil, Tulsi. Oxymum tenuiflorum, better known as holy basil or Tulsi, is grown in the courtyards of many Hindu homes and has been used traditionally for everything from infections to emotional grief. That wide range of uses makes the folklore expansive. But modern research paints a more focused picture. Today, most studies look at how Tulsi affects stress, not depression directly. In clinical and experimental research, it consistently shows effects on the body's stress response, including lowering cortisol levels and improving how people handle chronic stress. Its key compounds, like eugenol, rosmarinic acid, and various flavonoids, also show anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects. And in animal studies, Tulsi appears to influence GABA and serotonin pathways, which are central to how the brain regulates mood and anxiety. But here's the important distinction. Human trials don't show Tulsi acting as a direct treatment for major depressive disorder. Instead, they show improvements in stress, calmness, and mental clarity. And for people whose low mood is driven by chronic stress, inflammation, or constant mental strain, that shift can still make a meaningful difference over time. There's also growing interest in how Tulsi works under the surface. Eugenol can inhibit COX2, an enzyme involved in inflammation, while rosmarinic acid may support the gut microbiome, both of which are increasingly linked to mood regulation. But that research is still developing. In practical terms, Tulsi is best understood as a gentle stress support plant, something that helps stabilize the system rather than directly lifting depression. Quality can vary between teas, tinctures, and capsules, and while it's generally well tolerated, it's still worth checking with a clinician if you're on medication, managing blood sugar, or pregnant. Tulsi doesn't act fast or aggressively, but over time, it can help create the conditions where mood has a chance to improve. Number 7, chamomile, matricaria. Chamomilla is so familiar that most people don't even think of it as medicine. It's just that bedtime tea your grandmother made. But inside that gentle image is some real chemistry. Chamomile's main flavonoid, apigenin, can bind to the same type of receptors in the brain that benzodiazepine drugs use, the GABA-A receptor, which is part of your brain's main calming system. It does this more gently than prescription drugs, which is likely why chamomile can reduce anxiety and promote relaxation without the heavy sedation, dependence, or memory issues seen with stronger medications. Clinical trials in people with generalized anxiety disorder show that standardized chamomile extract can significantly reduce anxiety symptoms over several weeks. And in some studies, especially in older adults, those improvements also come with better mood and fewer depressive symptoms, but that doesn't mean it works the way most people assume. Chamomile isn't a direct antidepressant. Its effects on mood are mostly indirect, by calming the nervous system, improving sleep, and reducing chronic anxiety. It also contains terpenoids with anti-inflammatory effects, tying into the growing understanding that lowering neuroinflammation can support mood over time. In practice, chamomile works best when low mood is closely tied to stress, tension, and poor sleep. And one important detail, a cup of chamomile tea is soothing, but the amount of apigenin is much lower than what's used in clinical trials. The research relies on standardized extracts, which deliver a more consistent and concentrated dose. Chamomile is generally well tolerated, but people with ragweed or daisy family allergies should be cautious. And as always, it's worth checking with a clinician if you're taking other medications. Chamomile isn't powerful, but that's exactly the point. It's a gentle, steady way to calm the system, which over time can help mood follow. Number 8, ginseng. Panax ginseng has been traded, valued, and even worshipped for centuries. Chinese emperors treated it almost like currency, and Korean farmers cultivated it long before it ever appeared in supplement capsules. The name Panax comes from the Greek word for all healing, which tells you exactly how far the legend has sometimes run ahead of the science. And this is where things get complicated. Ginseng isn't just one plant. Asian ginseng, Panax ginseng, American ginseng, Panax quinquefolius, and the so-called Siberian ginseng, which isn't actually ginseng at all, contain different active compounds and have very different levels of evidence behind them. The real activity comes from a group of compounds called ginsenosides, and while they do affect mood-related systems like serotonin, dopamine, and the stress response, most of the clinical research doesn't focus on depression directly. Instead, it focuses on fatigue, cognitive function, and resilience under stress. In some studies, standardized Panax ginseng extracts have been shown to reduce mental and physical fatigue, improve focus, and support a general sense of well-being, which can matter a lot for people whose low mood is tied to exhaustion and burnout. But here's the catch. Ginsenosides aren't very active in their original form. They need to be converted by your gut bacteria into usable compounds like compound K before your body can really take advantage of them, which means the effect of ginseng can vary dramatically from person to person depending on your microbiome. In practice, ginseng tends to work best as a support for energy, resilience, and mental performance, not as a primary treatment for clinical depression. And like many plants on this list, quality and specificity matter. Look for clearly labeled Panax species and standardized ginsenoside content, since generic ginseng products can be inconsistent. Ginseng has a long history and real biological effects, but what it does for you depends just as much on your body as it does on the plant itself. Number 9, lemon balm. Melissa officinalis, better known as lemon balm, grows easily in many temperate gardens. Smells like lemon when you brush against it, and has been used for calm and sleep since the Middle Ages. Most people walk right past it, and that's a mistake. Inside the leaves, compounds like rosmarinic acid and certain terpenoids inhibit an enzyme called GABA transaminase. That's the enzyme responsible for breaking down GABA, your brain's main calming chemical. By slowing that process, lemon balm helps GABA stay active for longer, creating a steady calming effect. And this is what makes it different. Instead of directly activating GABA receptors like chamomile or benzodiazepines, lemon balm works by preserving the GABA you already have. In modern randomized trials, standardized lemon balm extracts consistently improve anxiety, overall mood, and sleep quality, and they're typically very well tolerated, even at higher doses. Some studies even combine lemon balm with valerian and see additional benefits for people struggling with sleep. For major depressive disorder on its own, especially more severe cases, the research is limited, and lemon balm shouldn't be viewed as a standalone treatment. But for people whose low mood is driven by anxiety, racing thoughts, and poor sleep, it can be surprisingly effective, easing tension, improving rest, and helping mood stabilize over time. Like many plants on this list, form matters. Teas and tinctures can be helpful, but the most consistent results come from standardized extracts used in clinical studies. Side effects are usually mild, though it's still important to be cautious with other sedatives and to check with a clinician if you're on multiple medications or are pregnant. Lemon balm isn't dramatic, but it's reliable. And for the right kind of low mood, that consistency can make a real difference. Number 10. Passionflower. Passiflora incarnata, better known as passionflower, was named by Spanish missionaries who saw symbols of the crucifixion in its intricate structure. That origin pulled it into folklore long before science had a chance to examine what it actually does. Inside the plant, compounds like chrysin and other flavonoids interact with the brain's GABA-A receptors, similar to how chamomile works, but with some additional effects on serotonin pathways. In animal studies, this combination produces clear anxiety-reducing and antidepressant-like effects. And in a handful of small human trials, passionflower extracts have reduced anxiety about as effectively as the drug oxazepam, often with less mental fog and fewer cognitive side effects. But this is where the limitations become clear. For depression, the human evidence is still thin. The strongest use case is in people whose low mood is driven by anxiety, restlessness, and poor sleep, where calming the nervous system can gradually improve how they feel. There's also early multi-omics research suggesting effects on inflammation and the gut microbiome, both of which are linked to mood, but these are still emerging signals, not confirmed treatments. And there's a practical issue that holds passionflower back. Different products use different parts of the plant and contain very different levels of active compounds like chrysin. That lack of standardization makes it difficult to match what was used in studies, or to predict how consistent the effects will be. That's one reason it isn't considered a first-tier option for depression. Instead, it's more often used as a gentle calming aid for anxiety and sleep, sometimes alongside other herbs. Like other GABA-acting plants, it's important to be cautious if you're taking sedatives, driving, or using it regularly with other medications. Passionflower is a good example of something you've probably seen before, but may not fully understand. And that's really the bigger pattern across this entire list. Some of these plants have strong, repeatable clinical evidence. Others have real biological effects, but still need more research before they can be relied on as primary treatments. The difference isn't always obvious on the shelf, but it becomes very clear once you look at the data. Some of these plants have strong clinical backing. Others show real promise, but still need more research before they can be relied on as primary treatments. The key is knowing the difference, because on the shelf, they all look the same. But in the data, they're not even close. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. And I'm curious, did anything on this list surprise you or change the way you think about these plants? If it did, let me know in the comments below. And tell me which plant you're most interested in trying. I read every single comment, and I genuinely enjoy hearing what stood out to you. If you found this helpful, go ahead and hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more content like this. And if you want more clear, science-based breakdowns like this, make sure to subscribe. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.